White billionaire family insulted the black woman at party, then she canceled their $5 deal. Snow swirled in furious spirals outside the glittering Marlowe Hotel, where chandeliers gleam like frozen suns above Chicago's elite. Inside, laughter clinked against crystal, every corner draped in gold. Nia Carter entered alone, her gown black silk, her posture unshakable, her eyes unreadable. She'd been invited, but the stairs that trailed her said otherwise. A valet had tried to shove her toward the service entrance. Security had studied her ID as though it were counterfeit. Now, under 1,000 diamonds of light, she stepped into their world, unaware, or perhaps fully aware of the storm about to break. Near the champagne fountain stood the Langstons, Evelyn, in ivory satin, with a stare sharpened to a blade, Richard's smile brittle as ice, Miles with his mocking smirk, and Lila with a laugh that cut deeper than any insult. Their empire was crumbling, though no one dared whisper it. Tonight they would prove their arrogance still had teeth. When Nia reached for a glass, Lila's heel flicked. Deliberate, cruel, wine exploded across Nia's dress in a violent crimson bloom. The hall fell silent, cameras lifted, and Evelyn's voice cracked the air like a whip. "You don't belong here." The words echoed, venom wrapped in velvet. Guests gasped, some smirking, others pretending not to see. Nia steadied herself, spine unbending, eyes burning with something the Langstons could not name. A silence swelled, heavy, electric. None of them knew the truth. The woman they tried to humiliate controlled more power than every jeweled guest combined. What she was about to reveal would not just shatter their pride, it would destroy their fortune, their future, and the very name they worshipped. And when the first whisper of her identity spread, Chicago would never forget this night. The snow needles, the Gold Coast as wind scours Lakeshore Drive, and the penthouse atop the Marlowe throws warm light across the frozen lake, like a beacon. Inside, marble floors shine, fireplaces murmur, and orchids lend a clean perfume beneath chandeliers that scatter icy halos over tuxedos and gowns. A jazz trio smooths the room while servers pass like clockwork through currents of money. Nia Carter steps from the elevator and pauses, letting the spectacle register before she crosses the threshold, composed and alert. She is 45, a billionaire, the private engine behind Zenith Global, and tonight she allows a flicker of excitement because this gala funds clinics on the South Side where winter chews through budgets and bone. Her gown is black silk cut with architectural precision. Her hair is swept into a deliberate crown. The only jewelry is a thin platinum cuff. Minutes earlier, a valet gestured toward the service entrance without looking at her face, then laughed it off when she did not move. Street-level security studied her ID a beat longer than the couple ahead, and lifted a brow as if one detail failed inspection. Nothing dramatic, everything familiar. She files each moment where she stores weather, not personal, not ignorable. At the reception table, an attendant reviews her invitation, the embossed seal, then her skin. The attendant politely asks in a voice manufactured to sound routine. The pair behind Nia receives wristbands without so much as a surname. Nia produces the email and watches the scanner blink green. She thanks the attendant with a smile designed to forgive and remember. The doors swing wide. Glass walls open to the lake where snow drifts like ash over dark water. Ice sculptures glow. Donor names climb a projection in slow constellations. Tables shimmer with crystal and menus printed like invitations to a coronation. Nia chooses sparkling water, though champagne gleams everywhere, then drifts toward a photography installation of neighborhood winters. Children chasing powder, elders sweeping stoops, a grocer warming his hands around a paper cup. The images tug a thread that leads to a laundromat, steam fogging windows while a girl dozes between cycles and a woman counts tips by a humming dryer. From that map to this room required fluency in money's grammar, escrow, indemnity, amortization, and a tolerance for spaces that test by staring. Zenith rose from long nights and precise bets. When a bank tried to squeeze her, she bought the building that held its executive offices and replaced lobby art with community murals. The penthouse hosting this gala belongs to a trust that owns a company that owns a company that answers, ultimately, to Zenith. The leaseholder believes the landlord is a sleepy Midwestern fund. Nia prefers it that way. Power breathes better when it does not announce itself. A floor manager approaches with the tiny smile of someone paid to smooth calamities and offers a tailor's kit for a non-existent snag. She declines, then asks the name of the florist who arranged night-blooming jasmine along the balcony. He brightens, provides a card, and slides away toward guests angling for visibility. Across the ballroom, the Langston family orbits the center chandelier as if it were their private sun. Evelyn wears cream satin in a rope of pearls. Her smile functions like a lever. You either move or you are in the way. Richard shakes hands with lenders and laughs half a beat too loud, the sound of a man narrating solvency to drown another story. Miles, broad-shouldered and bored, grades people as if they were furniture. Lila glides between conversations, gathering gossip like a jeweler gathers light. Their Empire Langston Properties once printed brochures with sepia groundbreakings and crystal spades. Now the spreadsheet lives on the brink. Towers refinanced at rates that nick flesh monthly. Delinquent contractors sharpening knives on change orders. A mezzanine lender waiting with covenant traps baited like candy. Richard signs the bridge papers at midnight and hides them beneath pocket square. Evelyn senses the tremor and answers it with calendar ferocity. Galas and photo spreads, because applause can resemble credit if you stand close enough. Miles treats staff like scripted scenery. Lila understands power as theater and rehearses daily. Nia watches, collecting data the way snow gathers on a ledge. A security guard drifts near, curiosity dressed as duty. "Ma'am, which organization are you with?" Nia names the foundation that invited her and asks a logistics question about the silent auction that forces him to segue. He nods, radio quiet again. Another entry in the ledger she keeps without pen or paper. Systemic bias never tires, it only changes outfits. A board chair recognizes Nia from a panel on inclusive procurement and brings her to a ring of founders. Relief warms the air. A surgeon outlines a neonatal warming device designed for clinics with unstable power. Nia interrogates failure modes, supply chain choke points, and regulatory hurdles in winter storm counties. She offers 2 introductions and promises a factory walkthrough if prototypes hold. Work steadies her, usefulness always does. From the balcony she watches the lake hurl itself against the breakwater and feels city wind ghost across heated glass. The penthouse unfolds in pale wood and matte stone, the kind of art that only announces itself if you listen. For most guests, it is a dream address with a waiting list for summer parties. For Nia, it is also a ledger line in a constellation of quiet holdings that provide leverage when deals turn into arm wrestling. She thinks of how narrowly she prefers to be seen, how privacy keeps decisions clean. The speeches begin. Evelyn takes the microphone and recites a history of generosity that edits out who built, who scrubbed, who carried, who froze at bus stops to open offices, later measured in applause. The room hums with admiration. Nia recognizes the rhythm of certain words: heritage, excellence, tradition, and how they glow when used to fence out difference. She refuses the easy anger that would steal attention from purpose and instead memorizes which donors clap first and longest. A waiter passes with champagne. Nia lifts a flute for show, then chooses water. Across the rug, Miles halts a young server with a raised hand and an eyebrow that spells hierarchy. "Mind the stemware," he says, not loudly, not kindly. Lila observes with a small rehearsal smile. They have not yet noticed Nia beyond a quick inventory of gown, age, and shade. That miscalculation gleams like a coin tossed to fate. During the silent auction preview, Nia studies lots, framed in gold, a portrait commission, a cabin weekend, field-level tickets, and naming rights for a research scholarship. She bids on the scholarship and adds a note recommending robotics kits for a public middle school. A woman in ruby satin asks which family Nia is attending with, as if attendance here requires lineage. Nia answers with the name of her host committee contact and returns the question with a smile that politely refuses the premise. In a corridor lined with winter landscapes, she overhears Richard bargaining with a lender for an extension. His tone wraps panic in charm, the vowels smooth as polished granite. 60 days, he murmurs, and a little air on covenants. The lender's reply is a blade wrapped in velvet. Nia keeps walking. Information tends to present itself when you refuse to chase it. Dessert arrives under silver domes that lift like small sunrises. The room resolves into predictable constellations. Evelyn at the gravitational center of compliments, Richard measuring laughs into proof of life. Miles choreographing staff by chin, Lila weaving between mirrors and power. Nia stays at the edge of that galaxy studying vector. She notes who bows to whom, who drifts when a name loses heat, who stiffens when someone darker holds the mic. Excitement has dimmed, but purpose remains bright. She came for clinics, scholarships, and the small corrections that ripple outward when leverage meets intent. Snow thickens against the glass. A distant siren scribbles a red line across the night. A volunteer asks Nia for a photo for the event feed, not realizing which archive the picture might one day adorn. Nia obliges, then steps aside to call her chief of staff about tomorrow's site visit at a community lab and a proposed incubator on a shuttered lot. They review a municipal bid calendar and a note about a zoning hearing where the Langstons plan to argue for variances. Nia files the details in the same internal ledger that tracks every slight and every opportunity. She is here because visibility remains a currency even when she dislikes the exchange rate. And she is here because the city that iced her beginnings also forged her will, and because power unused is a waste she refuses to tolerate. The doorman's smile stiffens when Nia steps from the elevator lobby toward the velvet rope that divides donors from everyone else. And a fresh guard eases sideways so her path narrows by design. "Invitation again, ma'am?" he says, though the scanner flashed green downstairs. She passes the card, he studies the foil crest, keeps his gaze off her face, and requests identification with the confidence of someone certain the rules favor him. She offers her license. He angles it beneath the light, murmurs into his radio, then unhooks the rope with a clipped nod. Two guests in white tie glide past unhindered, trading jokes that dissolve like sugar. Nia moves forward, breath measured, storing the moment beside 100 others. Not dramatic enough to protest without consequence. Not small enough to ignore without cost. Inside, chandeliers flare like winter suns and music spills across marble. Cameras chase names, a volunteer gestures toward a side door as if maps live on skin. Nia thanks her and continues. Evelyn Langston occupies the ballroom's warm center. Cream satin and pearls, gestures exact. Smile tuned for photography. Richard works the edge with practiced warmth that lands a fraction late. The sound of a man narrating solvency to anyone who will listen. Miles leans against a column with the lazy authority of a person who never carries his own coat. Lila glides with practiced elegance. Phone ready, collecting images that flatter the powerful and punish the inconvenient. At the bar, Nia asks for water. The server hands 3 flutes to a newcomer first, then sets her glass down without eye contact. She takes a sip and the small disrespect clinks against the others in her pocket. A security guard appears again, scanning her neckline for a badge that doesn't exist. "Which organization are you with?" he asks. She names the foundation that invited her and adds a crisp logistics question. He cannot answer. The conversation ends on her terms. A red light glows on a camera across the room. Whispers shift like a breeze. Evelyn glides over with 2 patrons in tow and a smile engineered to look generous in every frame. "Could you let staff through, please?" she says, projecting over Nia into the space behind her. Nia answers, "I'm fine here," then shifts half a step so a cart can pass without brushing her dress. Evelyn's expression doesn't change. "The help usually waits near the service hall," she says. Perfectly audible, perfectly deniable. Nia meets her eyes, heart steady. Respect usually opens halls on its own. A few heads tilt, a few phones tilt higher. Richard arrives with an arbitration smile. "Evening," he says, extending his hand with courtly weight. "If there's confusion, we can clear it." "No confusion." Nia replies, grip even. "Only poor assumptions." The word lands quietly and still rearranges the air. Miles steps in, amused. "Mix up?" He flicks 2 fingers at a waiter as though hailing a cab. "She needs the tray rote." The waiter flushes, caught between an order and a person. Lila hovers, smile sharpened. Phone angled for clean audio. "Some nights get hectic," she says, making sure her microphone catches benevolence. Nia sets her glass on a side table so both hands remain free. "I'm not part of your staff," she says. "I'm a guest." "Where's your table card?" Miles asks, enjoying the test. "By the lake windows," she says, which remains true whether anyone believes it. "Must be a seating mix-up." Lila chirps, as if charm can bleach intent. The circle tight. A chuckle drifts from behind Nia's shoulder, the sound of spectators settling in. The auction preview opens. Guests drift toward gilded frames and engraved certificates. Nia walks the perimeter, reading plaques to slow her pulse, texting her chief of staff a neutral update. Permits prototypes, a robotics team that needs lab time. Ordinary details steady her. A guest bumps her elbow, laughs, "Didn't see you," and keeps walking. Nia holds the sting where it can't be filmed. Back near the bar, Evelyn resumes choreography. "Standards and roles keep events elegant," she says to no one in particular, and everyone at once. 2 matrons echo the phrase like liturgy. Nia replies, soft but not small. "Elegance without respect is empty theater." The sentence carries. Miles snorts. Lila's smirk glows. A donor whispers bold. The guard from the rope reappears, posture rigid. "Ma'am, patrons only past this point." Nia looks down at the donor carpet beneath her heels. "Patrons look like many things," she says. He hesitates, unwilling to become a viral clip, and steps aside. 2 guests start filming anyway. Lenses cool, waiting for either apology or anger. Naya offers neither. She studies a photograph of children catching snowflakes in cupped palms, breathing evening out against the noise. A young volunteer approaches, nerves bright, and asks for a quick photo for the event feed. Naya agrees, offers a neutral smile and thanks her by name. Kindness, even small, disrupts a script. Richard returns with the smile he uses on lenders. "Let me find the coordinator," he says. "We'll smooth this immediately." "There's nothing to smooth," Naya replies. "People heard what they wanted to hear." He holds her eyes a moment, then peels away toward donors who grade worth by pedigree and square footage. Music swells. The auctioneer warms up. The room relaxes around its own reflection. Naya recognizes the pose, and the bruise under the pose. A server arrives with champagne. She didn't request. She declines and asks again for water. The tray wobbles. Glass kisses glass. A hush gathers like frost. Evelyn's voice slices the quiet. "Please clear space for staff." The line sounds soft enough to pass, sharp enough to cut. Naya says, "Words matter. So does intent." Evelyn answers, performing magnanimity for phones. Lila turns her lens, so followers can watch charity discipline misbehavior live. Caption writes itself, she murmurs. Miles leans in one more time. "Relax," he says. "You're making people uncomfortable." "Good," Nio answers, and the syllable rings between them like a bell struck once. A small ripple moves through the crowd. Several guests remember errands and drift away, guilt disguised as purpose. Others stay, hungry for spectacle. Niola gives them poise. Two students approach with questions about the neonatal device. She discusses failure modes and supply chains, offers a grant contract, and thanks them for building something that saves lives. Purpose steadies her again. When they leave, the old current returns, subtle as a draft under a door. Wrong list. Someone murmurs from a column's shadow. Probably catering. Another returns. Naya refuses to divide herself by answering ghosts. Snow braids itself across the lake. She keeps her line. A photographer corrals the Langstons for a family shot at the backdrop. As they arrange themselves, Evelyn tilts her wrist toward Nio, a gesture that could mean fetch or move. "We'll need space," she says. The help stands over. The photographer hesitates, then shrugs, trained to accept the hierarchy that pays invoices. Naya remains where she is, spine unbent. The shutter clicks. Lila looks beyond the lens and lifts her brows in pantomimed pity. "Don't take it personally," she says. "This is how these nights work. They work because people accept what shouldn't be accepted." Naya replies. A few faces soften. A few harden. Phones keep recording, and certain glory hovers a heartbeat away. The auctioneer calls for attention. Evelyn sails to the mic and praises heritage, excellence, and tradition. The words glitter. The edges cut. Applause unfurls. Naya holds her ground, letting dignity outrun rage, because rage would feed their story and starve her own. She thinks of clinics and scholarships, and names on grants that never cared about pearl rope. She thinks of a grandmother who taught restraint, that protects power. When the clapping fades, the room breathes again, but the bruise remains, dark as the lake beyond the glass. Have you ever faced judgment for who you are in a room that smiled while it cut you down? Share your story below, add your city, and tell us how you stayed steady. Your words could help someone tonight, and that courage might change another life. Please be kind, always. Ruth taught Naya to build possibilities from scraps. Before sunrise, she laced stiff shoes, wrapped a scarf against lake wind, and pushed a mop through lobbies that smelled like lemon and ambition. Homework happened at a plastic table in a laundromat corner while dryers rattled coins. Bills piled like snow. Ruth arranged them by urgency and wrote the smallest checks the month allowed. Naya learned compound interest from notes scribbled on cutoff notices and posture from watching Ruth meet managers without apology. Respect travels farther when anger arrives late. A science teacher handed Naya a scholarship form for a summer lab. She built a wind sensor from scavenged parts, won regionals, and learned that data bends power when paired with patience. College arrived through grants and night work. Internships rarely opened for girls from the streets. Television mispronounced, so she created one. A spreadsheet mapping empty warehouses, transit links, and shifting demand. She pitched a microfund to a credit union manager who had watched Ruth scrub his lobby. He said yes. She bought a cold warehouse near a rail spur, patched the roof, and turned it into a nimble distribution node. Vendors followed speed. Margins compounded. She formalized the venture as Zenith Global, and hired graduates from a vocational program that needed equipment more than applause. Zenith grew through discipline, not spectacle. She standardized payments at 30 days, indexed bonuses to community outcomes, and required contracts to include apprenticeship. She built hubs legacy brokers ignored, layered renewable backups into clinics that faltered during storms, and kept reserves boring on purpose. When a lender tried to squeeze, she bought the debt at a discount and replaced lobby art with community murals. When a mayor offered shortcuts, she declined and published procurement data. By the time trade papers whispered a valuation near $75 billion, Zenith had become a lattice of warehouses and clinics threaded by rules. Naya lived privately because cameras steal time, and time builds systems. She visited sites unannounced and asked custodians what broke most often. Across town, the Langstons traced their story through portraits and champagne. A grandfather cut ribbons with silver spades and smiled from newspapers while beams rose behind him. Langston Properties collected rent across a skyline and praised stewardship at banquets that worshipped tradition. Richard inherited the portfolio and a taste for risk he called strategy. High-stakes baccarat felt like an analysis because numbers moved, lights flashed, and the dealer followed rules that seemed honest. Losses traveled home disguised as networking. Evelyn curated the image with precision. She treated galas like art, directed lighting cues, ordered flowers by hex code, and kept a seating book annotated with alliances. Profiles praised her taste and called her philanthropic. She believed society worked best when she arranged it and seldom checked maintenance reports. Miles wore suits tailored for resumes he never wrote. He understood concierge desks, not cash flow. Lila learned cameras and captions, filling frames with borrowed light until followers equated ease with merit. Both loved introductions. Neither loved maintenance. The slow work of keeping buildings safe bored them, and boredom breeds shortcuts that hide until invoices scream. Reputation hid strain for a while. Maintenance budgets thinned, elevators lagged, a flagship tower bled cash during a contractor lawsuit. Insurance jumped after a burst pipe flooded a gilded lobby. A refinance locked payments to a curve that later snapped. Covenants tightened into traps. Richard refused to sell a heritage mid-rise because memories shouted louder than offer. He called a lender for one more bridge and folded papers under a pocket square like a conjurer's palmed coin. The performance bought weeks, not wisdom. When Zenith appeared, he saw rescue dressed as a partnership. A merger at $5 billion promised fresh credit lines, breathing room, and a story bankers could repeat without flinching. He imagined photos where names sat side by side as equals, though his balance sheets disagreed. Evelyn anticipated committees. Miles rehearsed a title. Lila storyboarded launches before reading compliance memos. They believed history guaranteed indulgence. Naya assumed nothing. Teams sat in courthouse basements and code offices, pulling files. They read inspection notes, lien lists, insurance claims, utility arrears, and tenant complaints. They found solid assets worth saving and liabilities that would poison any partner. She proposed a structure that protected community work, funded repairs on a strict schedule, and replaced executive seats with operators who respected maintenance more than galas. The deal stayed alive because stabilization could preserve jobs and keep buildings warm through winter. It also stayed difficult because governance atrophy does not reverse by ceremony. Meetings revealed character. Richard joked about winning streaks. Laughter died quickly. Evelyn mistook a vice president for an assistant and asked her to fetch coffee. Miles arrived late, misnamed analysts, and asked why reserves mattered if the lobby looked exquisite. Lila pitched content while compliance officers flagged safety. Naya kept her face still and updated the ledger in her head. She documents, recalculates, and lets math finish arguments. Ruth never saw those rooms, yet she shapes every calculation. Her apartment smelled like starch and courage. She bought winter coats from thrift racks, stitched buttons back on, and kept a jar where pennies gathered until a bill stopped shouting. During dialysis, she asked about scholarship kits, not prognosis. She said, make the world easier for the next child. Then, when she died, work became prayer. She left Naya a bracelet engraved with 3 rules. Count everything, waste nothing, let respect lead. Those rules became policy. Each acquisition required a local hiring plan, on-time pay clauses, an audited apprentice pipeline, and transparent procurement. Dispatchers, custodians, lab techs, and principals joined advisory calls. Supply chains prioritized smaller vendors with measurable records. Results spoke louder than interviews. The valuation mattered only because it unlocked cheaper capital for clinics, labs, co-ops, and schools. Pride never signed a purchase order. The process did. By the week of the gala, signatures waited behind red lines. Richard told friends the finish line was certain. Evelyn curated appearances that suggested inevitability. Miles smiled in the mirrors. Lila planned a reveal video. Naya reread covenants and weighed risk against purpose. Stabilizing the portfolio would preserve jobs and keep heat on. Tying Zenith to recurring neglect might damage work elsewhere. She decided to walk in, listen closely, and be ready to On paper, the merger waited in neat folders, perfectly staged for pens and cameras. In Naya's mind, each clause stood beside Ruth's rules, and those rules never bowed to performance. Power reveals itself when people expect theater. The Langstons expected deference, because legacy trained them to expect it. Naya carried a different legacy, built from steam, thrifts, study, and a grandmother's commandments. Her rise from a taped window to a company near $75 billion did not promise softness. It promised clarity, accountability, and service. That promise would shape what followed when arrogance mistook her for furniture and tried to shove her aside. What's a moment you proved someone wrong without shouting, just by staying steady until facts spoke? Share it below with your city, your field, and one lesson that still guides you. Your story might lift someone tonight and help them hold their ground with dignity. Please be kind and reply. Snow hammers the windows while the ballroom rearranges itself around spectacle. And Naya stands straight, shoulder damp, breath level. Lila glides with dancer poise, heel flicking at the perfect angle. A tiny hook hidden beneath charm. The trap catches. Naya's sandal snags, momentum breaks. Cabernet leaps from a waiter's tray, fans across her gown, and blooms into a cruel stain that cameras devour. Glass rattles. Music falters. Evelyn allows one heartbeat of silence before a verdict glazed in etiquette. You don't belong here. Richard lifts a hand as if calming a skittish audience, while his eyes audit risk. Miles smirks, thrilled by chaos he can blame on gravity. Lila raises her phone, whispering, "Hold for the clip." Naya steadies with 2 fingers on the pillar, rises and refuses, napkins thrust like hush money. A guard edges closer to steer her toward the service corridor. She meets his stare. "I'm fine." Waiters freeze, unsure which script pays their rent. The quartet crawls back into melody. Whispers skate under crystal. Snow floats like confetti beyond the glass. Naya's pulse wants speed. She grants rhythm instead. Evelyn steps nearer, pearls bright as frost. "Events require order," she says, projecting. "Order begins with respect." Naya answers, tone even, words clean as cut stone. 2 donors pretend fascination with a catalog while aiming lenses. Richard tries the soft smile again. "Accidents happen," he says. "So do choices," Naya replies. Miles taps an empty flute, pleased by the theater. Lila's gaze lingers on the stain with delighted precision. Naya breathes, gathers poise, and reaches for her clutch to text a reschedule. Before fingers find the zipper, the phone vibrates. Her attorney's name glows. She considers letting it ring, then accepts. "Go ahead," she says, voice steady. Noise folds away. Attention tilts. "We're clear on diligence," the lawyer says. Agreement sits in signature sequence. Final confirmation on the Langston merger. Richard hears his surname and turns with a smile like a mask. Evelyn eases her lips into something resembling grace. Miles watches the call as sport. Lila lifts the phone higher, hunting a miss. Naya steps half a pace out of traffic and studies the projection where donor names drift like constellations. She remembers Ruth's rules and the obligations attached to every dollars. Zenith deploys. The stain cools against skin. A ledger entry written by contempt. Board aligned, the attorney continues. Terms unchanged. $5 billion at close, with stabilization tranches. Ready? Naya listens to the room breathe. The guard rocks on his heels. The waiter waits. Pearls hover. A smile strains. A smirk drains. A lens thirsts. Naya says, "Hold." She lifts her gaze across faces that pretend not to see, and rests it on Evelyn. "Confirm one point," she says into the call. "Reputation clauses still permit termination, at discretion, when conduct conflicts with our values." "Affirmative," the lawyer replies. Naya nods once. "Then we're done." The words arrive softly, yet sheer through velvet like wire. "Terminate negotiations immediately. Notify lenders, counterparties, and agencies. File tonight." Silence swells until you could hear a snowflake land. Richard's glass tilts. Evelyn's pupils tighten. Miles stops tapping. Lila's smile fractures. "I'm sorry, what?" the lawyer asks, surprised by calm where fury might roar. Zenith Global declines to proceed. Naya answers. She does not raise volume. She raises consequence. The nearest phones capture three unmistakable words. Zenith, global, billion. A ripple lifts across the carpet. Richard steps in with a grin sharpened by panic. Surely we can discuss, he says. Contracts take patience. Naya ends the call after a measured thank you, then faces him. Deals take character. Evelyn recovers quickly, turns to the crowd with a benevolent tilt. There's been a misunderstanding, she announces. This guest is upset. We'll resolve matters privately. Naya denies anger a microphone. There's clarity, she said. Zenith Global will not merge with Langston Enterprises. The sentence carries. The room obeys silence. Someone whispers billion like a spell. Richard attempts courtly familiarity. Naya, that's extreme. Her chin lifts a fraction. Address me properly. Miss Carter, he corrects. We invested months. Think of staff, tenants, stability. Exactly what I'm thinking of, she replies. Stability requires leadership that honors maintenance, safety, and dignity. Your pattern breaks trust. I won't finance that pattern. Lila re-enters with sugary innocence. If feelings were hurt, let us apologize, she offers. Public drama helps no one. Naya's composure does not budge. I'm not performing. She gestures toward drifting names. I'm deciding. A text confirms. Notices are cued. Evelyn reaches for implication. You'll regret haste, she says, almost tender. All great families endure turbulence. Endurance is not entitlement. Naya replies. She turns to the guard who tried to hurt her. Please clear a lane for staff. They're working. He nods, chastened by heat he cannot name. A volunteer edges near, eyes bright. Did you say Zenith Global? Yes, as in clinics, robotics grants, satellite labs. Yes. Sound pours from balcony to floor. Guests lower cameras. Some straighten seams, trying to look like allies retroactively. Richard's jaw loosens. Miles searches for a quip and finds none. Lila angles for pity. Please, she says, soft for sympathy, loud for microphones. People make mistakes. Naya thinks of repairs deferred and tenants ignored. People also make choices, she answered. Tonight you chose humiliation over courtesy. Evelyn tries one more pivot. We donate millions. Good, Naya answers. Kindness funded by contempt is still contempt. The quartet, sensing history, picks a standard and plays it too slow. Snow chalks the black water. A rumor climbs the stairs. Merger canceled. Boardrooms buzzing. Lenders on alert. Board members across town. Refresh emails. Sensing shifts they cannot yet name. Coming tonight. Naya texts her chief of staff. 3 words. Proceed as planned. And pockets the phone. She turns to the waiter, whose tray started the chain. Are you okay? He nods, relieved. She helps gather fallen stems. Because dignity isn't posture, it's practice. A woman in ruby satin approaches with an apology that almost sounds like learning. Naya accepts it and keeps moving. The room resets around her. Gravity shifts. The center relocates. Where contempt stood, consequence now stands. Where performance sparkled, substance holds. Guests feel the change in their shoulders. Some slip out to call partners. Others approach with grins staged to read progress. Naya gives no one more than they earn. She walks to the lake windows, watches snowfall thicken, and touches Ruth's bracelet like a metronome. Choice, count, behind her. Evelyn marshals smiles that no longer bite. Richard tallies exits. Miles withdraws, and Lila edits captions that cannot unsay the truth. Recorded from 3 paces away. Naya breathes the clean chill ghosting through tempered seams, and lets stillness finish the scene. Then she raises her water toward volunteers, near the coat check, and says, to work that keeps people warm. They answer with a small cheer that feels like a hinge turning on oiled brass, and the night swings toward consequence, not theater. Ever stood up to unfair treatment? Drop your city below and share how you kept your dignity under pressure. Your story might steady someone tonight. Add your role, one lesson you learned, and a resource that helped. Be kind in replies. Real courage multiplies when communities listen. Your voice matters everywhere. Whispers loosen from every corner as the word Zenith slides across the ballroom. Snow strokes the windows and the scent of spilled Cabernet hangs in the air. Richard faces Nia with the trained smile of a host, then blinks like a man waking into a room he thought was his. The stem slips from his fingers. The glass kisses marble and breaks. Sound pulls heads toward them. He has read her name in memos and skimmed valuation notes. yet never expected the subject of his negotiations to stand here unshaken. Nia does not gesture or explain. She opens a slim case, slides out a card the color of tempered frost, and holds it. Platinum catches the light, then settles. Nia Carter, Chief Executive Officer, Zenith Global. She offers it without apology and without theater. Richard takes it with both hands as if one might drop the fact. Lines on his face realign, a calculation starts and stalls. His eyes track the letters like they might become a kinder name. Evelyn leans in, pearls bright, voice satin smooth. What an ornate title, she says, as if the words were costume jewelry. These nights bring many admirable leaders. The sentence floats, warm and poisonous. Nia's answer is silent long enough for the room to hear itself. A banker by the dessert table checks a risk alert and goes pale. A hospital trustee remembers Nia touring a clinic and asking about generator fuel before discussing checks. He bows his head a centimeter. Miles reads the card and finds no joke. Lila lowers her phone as comprehension eats the edge of her clip. The guard who narrowed Nia's path earlier stands very still. The quartet lets a note fade without replacing it. Richard reaches for gallantry. Miss Carter, he says, assembling steadiness, we should revisit terms. Timing, optics, mistakes at parties should not redirect history. History redirects when people reveal themselves, Nia replies. Paper tolerated what tonight clarified. She does not raise her voice. Evelyn's smile hardens. We have always welcomed excellence, she says. Our staff will apologize for clumsy service. Let us not embarrass anyone. The word staff scrapes. A volunteer stops filming, cheeks hot. A donor pretends to study a painting. The rumor completes its circuit. Guests who witness the stumble pretend they did not record it. A venture partner mouths the word billion like a prayer rewritten as caution. A journalist assistant pockets her phone and studies her reflection in black glass. The air thins, the lake darkens under new snow. Richard stares at the card as if letters might rearrange into part. His mind coughs up diligence. Lines he skimmed, inspection notes he dismissed, covenants he planned to loosen after closing. He remembers the reputation clause he called ornamental. The shards at his shoes reflect back a version of himself he cannot edit with a check. He bends to gather them, then stops, fingers hovering above glass. Nia lets quiet do work. My attorneys are issuing termination notices now, she says. Correspondence will reach your teams within the hour. Procedure, not vengeance, shapes every syllable. Miles shifts, uneasy for the first time tonight. Lila opens her mouth, then closes it again. A man in velvet speaks with the confidence of someone who never pays late fees. Surely a private corner would spare everyone discomfort, he suggests. The room answers by not moving. Private was the corridor that allowed the bruise. Nia regards him. Discomfort is not a problem to hide, she says. It is a consequence to understand. Evelyn changes keys, trading sugar for steel. One unfortunate minute does not erase a lifetime of patronage. She murmurs. Our family has shouldered civic burdens when others hesitated. Nia looks at the jasmine along the balcony and then back to the woman who arranged committees for decades. Burden is a word the powerful use when praise grows heavy. Stewardship includes maintenance, respect, and safety. Your record shows neglect behind ribbon cuttings. Phones drift down. A woman in ruby satin deletes her video. The guard steps sideways, widening the lane as staff ferry play. A waiter who almost collided with Nia meets her eyes, receives a nod and steadies. The quartet chooses silence again. Richard straightens. Anger seeps through the lacquer. I sold lenders on hope because I believed we would restore these buildings, he said. You crush livelihoods by withdrawing at midnight. Livelihoods fail when leaders ignore the work and favor the performance. Nia answers. Stability requires systems you refused. I will not finance more harm. Someone coughs. Someone else whispers. Not like this. Evelyn reaches for the tool that always worked. Proximity. She steps close enough to invade space and lowers her voice. Let me call a publisher. Let me call a chair. Tomorrow can look different. Tomorrow will look honest. Nia says. That will be different. The platinum rests against Richard's pulse. He tries a final script. Think of tenants, contractors, staff, he pleads. Pause for them. I am, Nia says. This decision protects them from another cycle of deferred repairs and public. You ask for capital without accountability. I decline. A breeze threads the room. Snow thickens, erasing the seam between water and sky. Heads lower the way people do during memorial readings. Some will later claim they always knew. In truth, many simply stopped pretending long enough to hear truth spoken plainly. Nia turns to the nearest staffer. Do you need this path cleared? She asks. The young man nods, surprised, then powers through with fresh confidence. Respect unknots muscle. The guard lifts the rope and keeps it lifted. Evelyn, unable to concede, tries one last angle. Zenith depends on friends, she says. Friends remember who hosted and who embarrassed. Zenith depends on trust, Nia replies. Trust remembers who honored dignity when no one watched. The words settle until even the chandeliers seem to dim. From the balcony, the lake wind shivers the jasmine. A donor closes her eyes as if listening for a verdict. A banker checks a term sheet and winces. Lila studies her hands. Finally, Miles studies the floor and finds nothing there. He can command. Richard looks down at the broken glass, then up at the card that refuses to change. The future reorganizes around a sentence he cannot unsay. His voice falls to a private register. This will ruin us, he whispered. Choices did that, Nia says. Tonight only revealed them. A moment opens, deep and quiet. Guests hear the mechanics of consequence clicking into place. Emails sent, covenants tripped, calls queued, reputations recalculating under blue light. Recording stops because spectacle feels cheap in the presence of clarity. The room exhales. The city inhales. Snow keeps writing its script, and the night accepts a new center. Nia inclines her head. Good evening, she says to no one, and She thanks the volunteers at the coat check, raises her water toward the catering team, and walks to the windows, where the cold makes honesty of every surface. Behind her, dread spreads through the Langston circle, while a steadier silence takes the rest of the room. Cameras, names rearrange into lessons. Power stands where it always was. Only now everyone can see it. Snow batters the glass while the rumor hardens into fact and the ballroom turns from theater to tribunal. Elevators ping, 3 lawyers step out in dark coats. Winter on their shoulders, a courier case ticking metronomic. They cross the hush toward the backdrop where the Langstons posed an hour ago. Ms. Carter, the lead counsel, says. Nia nods once. Envelopes appear, platinum seals unbroken. Termination, effective immediately. Counsel announces, notices to counterparties, lenders, and agencies are in process. A public statement follows within the hour. Richard reaches for a charm and finds dust. Let us discuss privately, he says. We will discuss compliance, counsel replies, placing the first envelope in his hand. Paper rustles like frost. Evelyn inhales to object, then watches a second attorney spread files across a cocktail table as if it were a bench. Tabs read reputation clauses, safety audits, maintenance arrears, lien schedules, and covenant breaches. Guests lean closer, pretending concern. Nia does not move. The room reorients around her. For avoidance of doubt, the second lawyer says, Zenith declines to merge, terminates all advance agreements and calls the bridge loan collateralized last quarter. Richard jolts. There was no call option tonight, he said. There is now, counsel answers. Default triggers are activated when your representative disparages a protected guest. We will file the incident report with time-stamped recordings. Phones lower. Miles strides forward, then freezes as a third envelope lands in his hand. Notice of removal from interim site oversight. Keys and access are revoked at midnight. Leela's knuckles blanch around her phone. The lens trembles. This is excessive, Evelyn says. Excess is deferred maintenance that injures tenants, the lawyer replied. Excess is unpaid contractors and falsified elevator logs. Accountability is proportionate. At the edges, guests drift toward coats. Calculating exposure, a banker slips into the corridor already dialing. A trustee whispers she never recorded anything. A developer mutters that a credit line with a Zenith, a subsidiary, must be protected. The floor feels colder. The courier case opens. Counsel draws a list that will travel like the weather. Canceled, she reads. Vendor consolidation for 5 mixed-use sites. Procurement partnership for hospital retrofits. Preferred lender referral channel. Emergency generator MOU. Tenant relocation bridge funding. Naming opportunity contingent on code compliance. All terminated. Her colleague adds, loans called due on Water Street Tower, Pritchard Square, Harborview Residences. Cure periods rescinded for misrepresentation. Richard hears the names distances. Please, he says. We're not villains. We made mistakes. We can repair them. Nia answers without heat. Repairs begin with truth. Your pattern refuses it. Evelyn steps forward, chin high. Our philanthropy has kept this city on its feet. One misunderstanding should not erase decades. What you built deserves repair, Nia said. What you neglected deserves relief from your control. The sentence lands like accurate light. The projector feed freezes. Donor rolls stop, faces meet reality. Miles orders staff not to post. Too late. A student's threat about dignity spreads. Langston racism. Respect is policy. Zenith not for sale. The photographer lowers his camera. Layla drafts a statement about hospitality. Replies arrive like scalpels. Nia's chief of staff texts confirmation. Alerts sent to clinics, partners, tenants. Language about accountability versus spectacle. At the improvised desk, the attorneys continue. Langston Holdings must facilitate immediate access for safety inspections. Deletes. Security fobs deactivated. Schedules posted for essential technicians. Tenants notified that heat, water and repairs continue under third-party oversight. Pending receivership. Richard sinks into a chair. Receivership, he repeats. Evelyn scans for loyalty and finds distance. We built scholarships and museums, she whispers. Keep building, Nia replies. Build apologies that do not ask for applause. Build systems that do not collapse when photographed. Snow thrums the panes, steady applause for consequence. A donor approach. I recorded the incident if your team needs it. Our investigators will receive anything you choose to send, Nia says. Voice composed, dutiful. A server brings towels. Staff clear glass. The guard who narrowed Nia's path now runs interference. Chastened and efficient. Guests keep leaving. The exits glow like warnings. Miles paces, checking messages from a fund that will not roll paper. We have hours, he tells Layla. We have minutes, she answers. Her feed fills with her smirk beside the card in Richard's hand. Delete it, she whispers to the air. Nia crosses to the volunteer desk. Before the statement posts, add this note, she says, dictating. Capital earmarked for the proposed merger. $5 billion will be redirected to a new instrument for minority entrepreneurs. Priority goes to housing, clinics, logistics, and manufacturing in overlooked corridors. Applications open within 30 days. Transparency will be radical. The volunteer nods. Title it the Ruth Fund. Nia adds. Publish every grant and metric. Her phone floods with messages from city leaders and small owners who fight long odds for short wins. She forwards none to the ballroom. This room will not eat that hope. Evelyn sways, then folds as if curtsying to gravity. A doctor kneels, checks pulse and breath. She fainted, he says, and signals for water. Lila panics, then kneels, shocked by the floor's hardness. Miles grips his father's shoulder and finally looks like a son, not a critic. Richard stares at the card, then at Nia, recognition dimming performance. I didn't know we were this, he whispers. You did, she answers. Everyone always knows. The cost just came due. He swallows. Help me save the buildings. I'll help save people, she replies. The buildings will follow or they won't. Council offers a final summary. Expect filings by morning. Locks changed where warranted. Emergency management protocols enacted. She extends one last envelope. This outlines your duties until a court appoints oversight. He takes it, hands unsteady. Reporters hover for silence instead of quotes, hearing the story without spin. A trustee tells Nia, thank you for not raising your voice. I simply raised the floor, she replied. Her chief of staff texts, trending in 12 cities. Moderators online, application scaffold in draft. Legal review green. The night tilts toward function. The band packs quietly. The projection goes black. Coats sweep from racks. Ice breath enters conversation. Nia stands at the lake windows and watches the wind erase footprints along the shoreline. The city carries on, loyal to weight and friction. She thinks of Ruth counting bills by drier light and smiles without softness. Justice tonight looks like documents, doors and heat that stays on. She thanks staff by name when she can, title when she cannot. She tells the floor manager that the Jasmine was perfect. She tells the volunteer to rest. She tells the guard to protect the crew carrying glass. Then she walks. People part not from fear but from recognition. Some attempt apologies that sound like bargaining. She declines the audit. Elevators open with a patient chime. Her team falls in behind her, carrying copies for couriers already en routes to lenders and registrars. The doors close on humbled and indignant faces. The city's weather keeps working. Across Chicago, the hashtag crests, and the first comment under the Ruth Fund announcement reads, I have an idea and a block that needs light. Nia replies with a link and a deadline. No fanfare, No flourish, just a line. Build and report. Behind her, the ballroom exhales and begins the slow, necessary labor of cleaning up after the truth. Media vans crowd the curb before dawn, headlights smearing snow into pale rivers, while anchors rehearse segments titled Billion-Dollar Bigotry. By breakfast, loops run on screens. Evelyn's line about help, the spill, the quiet where Nia refused to bow. Commentators trace contracts, clauses, and the way consequences arrived without shouting. Editorials admit Zenith's values were policy, not branding. Nia gives no interviews. Her statement stays brief: people first, safety always. Transparency over theater. Afterward, she tours a clinic generator room and asks a tech, which part fails when ice wins? Receivers log the Langston penthouse, change codes and post a viewing schedule. A photographer catches Richard carrying boxes to a borrowed sedan, face tight with arithmetic. Evelyn calls everyone, then walks to a boutique where a longtime acquaintance screens resumes. Pride cracks. She asks for seasonal shifts and learns barcodes. Hempins and the smile that pacifies returns without receipts. Miles meets a cleaning contractor at dusk. The foreman hands over a uniform, a badge and a route that runs past the offices, which once returned his messages in minutes. He empties bins and vacuums under tables where he used to lean with effortless authority. Lila updates applications, accepts a cafe offer and memorizes grind settings before sunrise. She serves coffee to a camera crew covering the scandal and realizes the lens does not lift for everyone. A drafted growth post earns replies that ask for changed behavior instead of captions. Guests who filmed humiliation confront their own frames. A banker loses a committee seat when his board forwards screenshots. A developer leaves a museum drive after donors ask about his laugh on the clip. The Ruth Fund opens inside a refurbished factory washed with winter sun. Founders line tables with prototypes and ledgers. An auditor posts the grant list where any neighbor can read. A baker in Bronzeville receives equipment for a delivery loop using lockers and bikes. A mechanic in Little Village pilots a retrofit kit for drafty furnaces. A coder in Inglewood builds software that tracks fuel and insulin temperatures for clinics. Results are published monthly. Zenith's logistics wing launches 2 cold hubs at transit nodes, hires by zip code and pays within 30 days. Vendors once starved by delays post photos of cleared checks and gratitude. Nia visits sites with a clipboard and a thermos. She asks electricians which panels fear ice, custodians where salt should live, and founders what help means when luck fails. She signs little and listens much. The scandal's name becomes shorthand in policy circles. City councils link incentives to maintenance records, not ribbon counts. Landlords who treated fines like tips replace elevators before parties. Foundations redirect gala budgets into published scholarships and inspection. Evelyn learns registers, sizes, exchanges, and the art of cheerful refusal. Some customers recognize her and attempt to curry pity. She breathes, folds sweaters, and completes the return with steadier hands than any winter gala ever gave her. Miles learns solvents and timing. He cleans a law office holding a Zenith folder marked tenant safety. He puts it back carefully and rides home on a quiet train. A headline on his phone reads Ruth Fund backs senior elevator project. He looks at his palms until the window answers. Lila tracks receipts and name. One morning, Nia stands in her line, code open to the lake wind. Lila tenses. Nia orders water and leaves a brochure for a free project management class at a neighborhood incubator. Lila goes, sits in the back and listens. Richard meets a counselor who reads silence like a ledger. He waits in a clinic saved by a generator's Zenith placed through a vendor he once ignored. He practices the sentence, I do not know, and discovers questions that carry work rather than applause. Reporters search for a victory lap and find work instead. Winds appear as lights that stay on, apprenticeships posted with schedules, and shops that add second shifts. Online arguments cool while results stack. The phrase moral accounting moves from op-ed to street slang. The Marlowe's ballroom changes skin. New hosts fill it with community nights and sliding tickets. A wall honors volunteers, not heirs. Jasmine returns in spring and the staff move without flinching. Some who filmed Nia request meetings months later. She accepts when practice changes and declines when volume is merely low. Her calendar marks site visits, not forgiveness tours. A nurse writes that a furnace hummed steadily through a blizzard and a child slept warm. A graffiti artist quotes the line, policy is how we love strangers under an overpass in cobalt paint. On a gray morning, the boutique posts Evelyn to return. She handles a line with patience that feels like a muscle learning strength. At lunch, she reads that the penthouse was sold to a nonprofit for an art school and a rooftop greenhouse. After work, she walks to the lake and listens to ice speak. Miles receives his one-year pin and declines a desk title he could wear as a mask. He chooses a course in building systems because repairs are where dignity hides. Most nights he sleeps. That is new. Lila earns a shift lead badge, brings her class certificate to the incubator, and asks if volunteers are needed. She builds a spreadsheet and remembers the pleasure of work done cleanly. She stops rehearsing humility. She practices. Richard stands in court and surrenders keys without selling pain as nobility. After the hearing, he looks up at the towers he once believed loved him. He mails a check to the incubator with no memo and no press. Nia meets the founders from blocks that lean on water and blocks that lean on rail. She asks 4 questions. What do you need? Who can help? How will progress be measured? And where will results live in public? Policies follow answers. Money follows policies. Audits follow money. Chicago tells the story in smaller signs. A hardware store orders through a pooled contract. A clinic's backup tank stays full. A laundromat hires a second attendant. A robotics team wins regionals using sensors born from scrap and stubborn joy. A streetlight map shows fewer dark corners. Friends ask if Nia forgives the family that tried to turn her into furniture. Forgiveness, she says, is a practice braided to responsibility. She will trust change when people she cannot see are treated well. Until then, her answer is service scaled by rules. Before spring ends, she tours the art school. Students rehearse under chandeliers that once performed a pedigree. Jasmine frames the balcony and a girl practicing scales looks up, smiling without permission. Nia steps to the glass and breathes cold air that always tells the truth. Back at her desk, the Ruth Fund dashboard maps grants like constellation. She reads comments, corrects mistakes, funds boring excellence, and moves capital with care. She texts her team, keep promises, keep heat on, keep learning. Then she shuts the lamp and lets the skyline carry the shift. What's a cause you'd fight for? Share below with your city, role, and one action you've taken already. Add a resource others can use, a deadline and a small goal. Keep replies kind, specific, and brave. Your story could spark help where it's needed most. Starting tonight, be detailed, be generous. Justice arrived without a shout and stayed because it was written into action. The night that tried to turn a woman into furniture ended with filings, access, and heat that did not fail. Nia refused the theater, chose structure, and the room felt the difference in its bones. Lenders recalculated terms. Inspectors entered spaces that had been staged for donors, not safety. Tenants heard phones answered before midnight. Volunteers kept working without flinching. Under chandeliers that once performed pedigree, people saw what power looks like when it serves. Cruelty tried to write the headline. Dignity wrote the policy, and policy held. Her victory was not one moment, but a ledger of disciplined habits learned beside humming dryers and fluorescent nights. Ruth taught rules that fit on a bracelet and filled a life count everything. Waste nothing, let respect lead. Those rules shaped Zenith from a patched roof near a spur into a lattice of clinics, hubs, apprenticeships, and invoices cleared on time. They guided Nia across a ballroom where arrogance pretended to be order. They guided the quiet call that redirected $5 billion from spectacle into capacity for people who never ask for spotlights, only fairness that arrives on schedule. The lesson for anyone with a platform is simple and stern. Equity is not a speech, it is a system. Wealth without responsibility collapses. Power without service corrodes. Fame without proof fades. What lasts are boring, beautiful choices that keep strangers warm, paid, informed, and safe. When leaders forget, communities must remind them with contracts, coalitions, audits, and cameras that point inward on budgets, not outward on targets. That night taught that truth in front of glass and gold. Tomorrow repeats it in clinics, shops, classrooms, kitchens, and loading docks where real life lives. The Langstons learned a price that pride never budgets. Reputation could not repaint elevator logs or silence tenants left shivering in their own homes. Their wealth did not vanish because of one sentence. It eroded under years of neglect and finally met daylight. A penthouse emptied. A boutique shift began. A cleaning route started at dusk. A cafe opened before sunrise. Those images did not exist to shame people earning wages. They existed to remind every watcher that titles do not confer virtue. An apology means very little until it funds repairs, honors schedules, and moves costs from the vulnerable to the responsible. Meanwhile, the Ruth Fund switched on like a lantern that refuses to go out. Every grant posted amounts, milestones, setbacks, and fixes in public view. Dashboards invited questions and corrections. Bakers shipped bread through micro-hubs near train lines. Technicians installed retrofit kits that warmed old buildings without breaking budget. Nurses monitored storage during storms with trackers that kept medicine safe. Apprentices trained with veterans who cared more for craft than applause. Entrepreneurs built delivery loops, childcare cooperatives, and fabrication labs that kept money circulating close to home. Results did not trend for a day. They accumulated month after month where neighbors could measure them. You watched a woman refuse performance and practice power that serves. You watched a crowd choose listening after a lifetime of watching. You watched a city translate outrage into procurement and timelines so promises no longer depended on personalities. Most of all, you saw how calm sentences backed by follow-through can move a room faster than 1,000 clips. That is our commitment here, no empty slogans. Only work that stands when the lights dim. The story began with a spill and a slur. It ends with a standard and a map that anyone can follow, share, and improve. So here's the moral and the mission. Dignity is a daily decision. Justice is logistics, with heart. Equity requires budgets, not just banners. If you hold influence, publish timelines and penalties. If you receive trust, report results where critics and allies can both read them. If you attend parties, remember that service workers see the truth first. If you inherit a name, inherit the maintenance too. And if you are ever pushed toward a door that says, service, remember that real service is what keeps heat on, lights steady, and promises kept. Now your part begins. Smash subscribe if you believe in justice. Tap the bell so you never miss transparent progress from the Ruth Fund. Comment equity in your city to map where our next features should go. Share this story with someone who still thinks dignity is branded. Post it in group chats, forums, workshops, and classrooms where budgets are planned. Tag leaders who deserve pressure and neighbors who deserve praise. Every click that lifts accountability builds a wider circle of safety, and every share plants one more seed of courage where it counts. Take one action within the next 24 hours and tell us about it. Donate to a clinic, sponsor a toolkit for apprentices, order from a local shop, translate an application, proofread a grant, design a flyer for a tenant council, cover a bus card for an interview, or watch a child so a nurse can sleep. Put your commitment in the comments with equity in your city, so momentum becomes visible and help can find you. If you lack cash, give time. If you lack time, give a signal. If you lack both, recruit 2 friends who can act. If you run a company, publish payment timelines and honor them. If you manage a building, post maintenance logs where residents can read them easily. If you sit on a board, make bonuses contingent on safety, service, and audits rather than ribbon photos. If you teach, assign a mapping project that finds dark corners and drafts a repair plan with shop owner. If you curate events, trade one chandelier for a public inspection and stream it live. If you shape policy, write clauses that make respect enforceable, not aspirational. To those who have been judged for how you look, speak, pray, love, or arrive, your steadiness belongs here. Share a moment when you stood upright and changed a room without shouting. To those who stayed silent and now want to help, humility is a better credential than any headline. Start small, start today, and show your work. To those who profit when accountability weakens, understand that the audience has changed. Transparency moved from novelty to baseline, and will not move back, because outcomes speak louder than narratives ever will. This channel will keep covering the Ruth Fund and the builders who turn hope into heaters, labs, apprenticeships, and invoices cleared on time. We will publish maps, interview crews, follow repair schedules, count deliveries, and revisit projects after the cameras leave. We will keep receipts open and correct errors quickly, because accuracy honors the people we claim to support. Celebrate with us when outcomes land. Challenge us when something feels off. Bring names we should feature. Bring problems we should solve. Bring proof when something works. Subscribe, share, and stay. Comment on equity in your city. Add one resource you can offer and one request you need filled. Tag a mentor who leads with fairness. Bookmark this story for the day somebody shrugs that cruelty is just the way things are. Return then, reread these lines, scan the comments, choose a commitment, and follow through. We do not need a miracle. We need millions of ordinary decisions, guided by respect and measured in public. That is how a city changes. That is how this story keeps going, long after the music and the hashtags fade.